Welcome to the Snowbirds Expat Radio Podcast. I'm Gerry Scott, founder of the Snowbirds US Day Tracker and the Canada Physical Presence Tracker app. Hello, everybody. Today we have a very interesting podcast. This has got to be the number one question that we get through emails, through phone calls, is this confusion around the 12-month rolling calendar. A lot of people think it's an immigration thing, and people think that it's a tax thing, that the average snowbird should just have to worry about, or should have to worry about this 12-month rolling calendar. So I've told people before, for the average retirement snowbird, you should not have to worry about it from a tax perspective. So today we have Emma Raivio. I'm so sorry.
No worries.
We only worked on this an hour before the show, so I apologize. She's with VSH CPAs out of Bellingham. So today truly is a cross-border show. We've got Gerry Scott up here in Vancouver, and we've got Emma in Bellingham, which is only about, I guess it's about an hour down the road.
I think a little under, depending on the border.
Yeah, exactly. If you have an exit, it's less than an hour. If you don't have an exit, it's a lot more than an hour. So welcome to the show, and thank you for your time. And I got some great questions for you. So we're going to start off right away. And why do I need to track my days? As a Canadian snowbird heading down to the States, why do I have to track my days?
Well, it's important because exceeding a certain number of days in the U.S. can result in a filing requirement for both non-U.S. persons and entities. So we have like the typical idea of a citizen or resident of the U.S., but if you exceed a certain amount of days in the U.S.'s eyes, you are now a resident here.
Okay, so for a snowbird, they're in Windsor, and they cross the border. They are issued from an immigration point of view, they are issued a I-94, and they head down to the States, and they basically got 6 months from that date. But you're saying now that the other big concern, and this is why we built the Snowbird US Day Tracker app, is that you do have to track your days from a tax perspective. So let's deal with that first. How much time can that Canadian snowbird who's retired spend in the United States?
Yeah, so I guess before that point, I just want to note that for U.S. people, it's a calendar year, 12-month calendar year, January to December. That's the days you're tracking. And in regard to that, there's really two tests. So if you're going to be in the U.S. for 183 days or more, that's when you're seen as a U.S. resident. And you would have to file a U.S. tax return, and you would file a Form 8833 for the treaty tiebreaker to claim your Canadian residency. So when you're over 183 days, you've got to file the tax return, and it comes with all of those foreign reporting disclosure requirements. So thankfully, you won't get any of that income inclusion that can arise from those, and some can be really penalizing. But you do have to still file those, and they're really time-consuming and expensive. So even though you don't have to pay that tax, you have to pay tax professionals, and they're not easy forms to complete. And then even if you're within 183 days for that year, there's another test called the substantial presence test. So if you're more than 183 days in a 3-year look-back period as well, then you'd have to file a Form 8840 to claim a closer connection to Canada. So if you have no U.S. income, then that's all you have to file is that form. It's pretty simple, so that's nice. It's a lot less of a cost to you, and there's no tax again. But it requires some effort because it's not just like, oh, I'm good for that 183 days this year. It's really a culmination of the current year and the prior 2 years, and there's a little formula involved. So it is really important, especially for your tax professional, to receive those days and make sure that you're adhering to that and you're not meeting the substantial presence tests.
And that's exactly what our app does. It's based on IRS tax. So every year this year, it's a full year. For the calendar year. And then of course, 2022, it was 1/3. And then of course, 2021, it is 1/6. So we calculate all those days and we carry it forward. Now there's always a confusion because it says on the calendar, people get confused around the 183, 182. and it says you have this many days remaining. And all we're telling you is that you need to file your 8840 once you exceed that certain date. So, why is everybody getting it wrong when it comes to a 12-month rolling calendar for these snowbirds? I see it on every website out there that snowbirds should be concerned about a 12-month rolling calendar. So, explain that to us.
Well, there is a rolling calendar test, but it's not for individuals. It's for non-US entities. So I think that's the confusion really is, let's say you own your own corporation that's in Canada and you like to work over here in the US. Well, that's where it becomes an issue for your entity to now potentially have presence in the US and have to file a US tax return. So if you have an employee performing services for the company in the US for a period aggregating 183 days in any rolling 12-month period, and during that time, you're at least generating 50% of the gross active business income from those services performed here, then your business could be seen as having a branch here. And there's also another test with that 183 days if you're providing services respect to the same or connected project to a US customer or a foreign company that has a permanent establishment here. And that would also result in a filing requirement. But again, that's 12-month rolling periods only for entities. So maybe you heard your employer tell you to watch how many days you are in a rolling calendar period. That's not really for your own benefit as much as it is for the companies. You need to pay attention to your days on the calendar year.
But the average snowbird that just goes into the United States to enjoy the warmer weather, the golf, the pickleball, all these things, that person does not need to worry about a 12-month rolling calendar from a tax
No,
perspective.
no. If you have no employment, not working for a corporation or any type of foreign entity, you don't need to worry about that rolling calendar.
Okay. Okay. I was all about to say, see, there is no such thing, podcast over, but that's not the case. So why are they confusing with immigration? And I know I'm asking the wrong person, but there's nothing out there that says that there's a 12-month rolling calendar for immigration. Have you come across that at all?
No, I truly think it is the confusion between what is required for an entity perspective and a person perspective. And, a lot of snowbirds at some point did want to come to the US and work for a company that's foreign. So maybe in that regard, they have been told that. That's just from the company standpoint. So I think that kind of travels forward. And then word of mouth as well, having another snowbird friend tell you that their CPA told them something, but maybe they heard it wrong or it was talking about another item on their tax return. And then it just gets passed through like the game of telephone.
I was talking to someone the other day that called up on the phone and they said that when they went through immigration, they drove across and they were called into that little room, that special little room where they put the spotlight on the people and they're sweating and they're asking all these questions. They said that they have to keep track of a 12-month rolling calendar. And sadly, even the immigration, these border crossing agents are getting it wrong. It's very, very confusing. Now, the other things that we talked about what are the other things? So we know we have to track a calendar year, which is important for the closer ties. What other concerns should these people have, snowbirds heading down south that are Canadians and having their homes? And what happens if they're renting out their homes? Does that cause problems as well?
Well, if you're renting out your home, you now have US source income because that home is located in the US. So then you would have to file a US tax return if you exceed a certain income threshold, which isn't very high. So that would complicate things. That's where we say, if the Form 8840 would be required, only that form if you have no US source income. Once you start having some US source income and activity, then things get a bit more complicated. And that I would highly recommend talking to a US tax advisor with, and for both your US accountants and Canadian accountants to talk so that you can, do some entity structuring and make sure that you're doing the right transactions here and in Canada so that you're not jeopardizing your position anywhere or increasing tax due. So that's a whole other ball game. But
Well, it
besides,
sounds like, go ahead.
oh
Sorry. Go
no,
ahead.
go ahead.
No, you go ahead. Sorry.
But another issue too is where are you located? Where do you like to travel? Because here in the US, we have wonderful 50 states and DC, and all of our states have their own taxing jurisdiction. And with that, not all of them recognize the treaty. So filing that Form 8833, that's to claim a treaty benefit so that you can be recognized as a Canadian resident and not have that guilty or sub F or any other income inclusion that could arise. You just still have to file those disclosures. But some states, like California, for instance, they don't recognize that. And instead, it's really on the amount of income source to that state. So, again, not really applicable for snowbirds as much, but if you're working in California and earning income for services performed in California, if your income earned is above a pretty minimal threshold, then you have to file in California as well. So it can get a little tricky, and you do want to make sure that you're, again, talking to someone if you find yourself residing in a certain state very often. If you prefer Hawaii or California, or you have a vacation home there, you really need to look out for that and make sure that you're talking to professionals there as well that know that state taxing jurisdiction, so that you can be safe in regards to that. And sometimes it's all about just coming with a professional, coming together and seeing if there's a different compensation arrangement, for instance, or any other type of strategy we can do in order to limit that exposure in the US.
So, so we've covered the 12-month the rolling calendar. We made it clear that it doesn't exist for a lot of snowbirds. The 12-month rolling calendar is for those entities. I hope that we've made that very, very clear. But tell me a little bit more about VSH CPAs in Bellington. What other services are you performing for snowbirds or even just Canadians working down south?
Yeah, so I am a tax manager at VSH and I specialize in international tax. So we work on international and cross-border tax issues from the US side, right? So we like to collaborate with whatever country you're also pulling in activity from, your residency from. We like to collaborate and work together to make sure that the US reporting side is fully compliant and also to benefit you the best. So we do a lot of consulting as well as compliance work. So a lot of 1040 non-resident returns for those that do have US source income or that exceed that 183 days. So we spoke about in that calendar year. So that they can file at 8833. We help file those Form 8840s if you meet the substantial presence test. And we also just are here as consultants. If you're curious, if you think you want to venture into the US or you want to come vacation here, just to make sure that you're getting all the information you need in order to make an educated decision and be more in control of your financial life.
You know, we've always said that this, when you and I talked earlier in the week, we said that the podcast, we would try and keep it short because we just want to make sure that people understand and don't go into too many of the details of these rolling calendars and these, you know, what is good for a snowbird or what snowbirds should be paying attention to. But we do plan to do a webinar that we will get Emma back, and she will be presenting, and then all your questions will be available. With technology today, you can raise your hand on the Zoom call and ask your question, and we'll make sure that we have Carson kind of reading out a lot of those questions to us so we can get them answered, because it doesn't matter how much information you give people. They're still going to run back and say, well, I heard it from Emma, I heard it from Gerry, and they said, well, they still don't know what they're talking about. And then they have a few more drinks around the campfire down in Arizona or Sarasota or Maui, and they seem to kind of get this wrong all the time. So anything else you can add that snowbirds need to be concerned about?
As far as snowbirds, I think at a general sense, what we've covered is great. I think something that everyone needs to keep in mind is that taxes are very complex, and this is only just the tip of the iceberg with certain issues, especially with entities. So especially with entities, if you're working for one, and I know it doesn't really apply here, but there's a lot more than just that 183 test that can make you subject to being taxed here. So that's another point. But also, I just really want to hit home that besides the federal, there are states, and some states are very aggressive. California is aggressive. New York, there's several. And you don't want to be hit with some of those notices because a lot of the time they like to assess more than you really due. So,
oh, that's interesting. Well, Emma, I tell you, I really appreciate your time, and thank you for making the time to join us today. And we will make sure that we do a webinar over the next little while here, and there's going to be a new feature on the app which we're working on right now. So when you do turn on the Snowbird US Day Tracker app, a little feature will pop up and say, listen, we've got Emma coming up on a webinar. We're going to be covering the 12-month, the 3-year formula that we need to track. We'll tell you again that the 12-month rolling calendar does not exist, but this is all going to pop up on the app, and you can sign your name down, and you automatically will have a seat for the presentation that will be done through Zoom. And like I say, I will be hosting it, but Emma will be providing all the technical knowledge that will be needed for Snowbirds. So, Emma, thank you again for being on the podcast, and
thank you for having me.
We look forward to the webinar. Yes.
Yes, of course. I hope to be on here again one day, and we can chat about anything else as well.
Well, yes, exactly. So, once again, I always tell people the world is small, and be kind to all.